Today's episode is part one of a three-part series titled Hatching from the Egg to Creating Your Own Nest Egg. Part one will focus on young adults. Young adults have so much time to prepare for retirement, but the best time to start planning for your future is yesterday. We will discuss common pitfalls, misconceptions, obstacles, and fraud that many young people face regarding finances and their future. Hello and welcome to Real Life Regulators. This podcast series is brought to you by the North American Securities Administrators Association, also known as NASA. This podcast was created to educate investors using real-life examples of security fraud cases. During each episode, we typically review different cases and discuss what went wrong, how you can identify the red flags of securities fraud, and what you can do in the future to protect yourself and your loved ones from a similar situation. Today's special episode is part one of a three-part series titled Hatching from the Egg to Creating Your Own Nest Egg. We will cover best practices for early investors, working adults, and retirees. We will discuss the importance of avoiding fraud and being a smart consumer. I'm one of your hosts, Nick Vonderu, the Education and Public Affairs Manager for the Alabama Securities Commission. My co-host today is Francois Grayson, Assistant Director of the Utah Division of Securities, and Tina Kotzelis, Director of Investor Education and Consumer Outreach Office at Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities. Before we begin, let's start off and tell a little bit about who you are and what we do in our roles. I will start. My name is Nick Vonderu, and I'm the Public Affairs and Education Manager for the Alabama Securities Commission, and we conduct outreach events for all types of groups all over the state of Alabama, and we provide investor education and fraud prevention seminars. We also draft press releases and we manage our social media accounts, among many other things. Francois, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Nick. As Nick said, I'm Francois Grayson, the Assistant Director for the Utah Division of Securities. I've been with the division for about 7 years in different roles, including the Enforcement Legal Analyst, the Compliance Examiner, and then the Senior Manager of Investor Education. And then prior to my time at the division, I worked at a financial firm as a licensed financial professional.
And Tina, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. I'm Tina Kotzelis, Director of Education and Outreach at the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities, and we too go out and give investor education presentations to consumers to help them avoid the pitfalls of investment fraud. This is the first part of the three-part series, Hatching from the Egg to Building Your Nest Egg. We hope to share some insight about investing practices and pitfalls to avoid while entering the workforce. So to get this kicked off, why is it so important to start planning for your future early?
Well, just to tell you a little bit more about my background, I've been at the Securities Commission for about 6 years. And before I joined the commission, I actually worked as an assistant director of admissions for a private college located here in Alabama. And I saw firsthand some of the pitfalls that young people face unknowingly at a very, very early age that will affect them long term. Another disclosure is whenever I was younger, I actually sold cars at a Honda and Acura dealership. And I would see people make unwise financial decisions because they really didn't research, or implement a budget. And we're going to discuss some of these in a little bit more detail later on. But going back to whenever I was working at the college, something as simple as trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. Whenever I was at the college, I saw so many students that would come in and they had a direct plan of exactly what they want to be when they grow up. I would talk to an 18-year-old and they would come in and say, I want to be a nurse. Someone else would come in, I want to be an attorney. And there's not many of us that have that kind of direction at an early age. And there's some of us that, we don't really figure out what we want to be when we grow up until we're in our 30s and 40s. Me actually kind of being one of those. And so The important thing is whatever path you choose, you need to be a smart consumer and research every opportunity that you have and try and pick the path that has the least resistance financially. Some people will choose college, trade schools, military, or jump straight into the workforce. But again, it's just important to just research and see what each of those careers, what they will actually require of you to have before you can actually jump in. And we'll discuss how you can do that a little bit later. It's extremely important to understand the concepts of savings and investing at an early age. And I think you can just about ask every successful investor about their biggest regret. And I think most of them would probably tell you that their biggest regret is that they didn't start investing even earlier than what they did.
Do you think that today's young people understand the concepts of investing?
Yes and no to some extent. But I do think generally young people understand the idea, at least, that they can put their money into a company or idea or concept with the potential for receiving more back in the future than what they invested. Or in other words, getting a return on your investment. I think young people generally understand the concept of risk versus reward and that they can lose their investment. I don't think that many young people think about broader concepts of investing, like asset class and asset allocation affecting their risk exposure, and then the diversification of their investment. And when I say asset class, I mean, are you investing in stocks or bonds or real estate or cryptocurrency? And that's important because all these asset classes have different risks associated with them. So even the length of time you plan to invest is important because it affects how much time you may have to ride the ups and downs of the stock market. When you're young, it seems like you have all the time in the world. And maybe from an investing perspective, you do have a lot of time before the standard retirement age to accumulate those returns and absorb some of those losses. And I think understanding investing concepts may seem difficult, but as a young person, I think it can be easier to relate to if you first acknowledge that the decisions you make when you're younger impact your future. And that includes being thoughtful about your financial future and planning for how you can accumulate wealth. A lot of that planning starts with typical things that you can control right now, like maintaining a good GPA in school, learning practical skills, and then seeking out internship and job opportunities early to explore what career path you want to pursue. So the planning and the overall investment in yourself start early.
How would one research a future career?
This is a really, really good question. And there are so many resources out there that young people don't even realize is out there. I've had the opportunity within the last 2 months to actually go out and speak to about 2,000 middle school and high school students, and just some of the simple questions that I ask it's kind of entertaining, but it's very interesting too. Like I will ask them, what age are you thinking about retiring? And you would be shocked at the hands that go up that say they want to retire in their 40s, or if they're going to retire in their 50s. And, if you have those kind of lofty goals, you need to start kind of planning for those at a very, very early age. And if you're really wanting to plan properly, you need to start doing some research. So when it comes to kind of figuring out what you want to do or what you want to be when you grow up, one of the easiest things to do is to find someone that's working in that field. And I would highly suggest shadowing someone. Whenever I was 18 years old, I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist. Well, I had a cousin that worked as a physical therapist, and I got to shadow him. And then I went to the wound center, and I real quickly decided that is not going to be the career choice for me, because I don't like, the things that you see in the emergency room, like the blood and all that kind of stuff. So that was not a good choice for me. So I X'd that out completely. So sometimes you have to figure out what you don't want to be that will lead you to the path of where you should belong. But there are things that people can go out there and look at. When it's coming to researching your future career, number one that you've got to look at is if you have a degree in mind that you're wanting to earn, you need to really do some research and see what kind of job can I get with that degree. I cannot tell you how many students I would see that would earn a degree in exercise science, a bachelor's degree, and they assumed that they would be able to get a job in physical therapy, which you cannot. So those people would obtain a 4-year degree that would not get them into the field that they desired, and they would then have to come back and get an associate's degree in physical therapist assisting to get the job that they truly wanted. So essentially, they wasted 4 years of college. If they would have done the proper research, they could have saved themselves a lot of headache. Another thing that people need to look at is the occupation that you're thinking about going into. You need to look at the starting salary in the area where you currently reside and where you would like to reside. Because just for an example, a nurse in Alabama's salary is not the same as a nursing salary in California or Louisiana. So you just have to make sure that the occupation that you're thinking about going in is going to deliver the lifestyle that you hope to have. Another good example is, teachers. If people are majoring in education to be a teacher, they're not choosing that major to be a rich person. They're doing it to be, basically a public servant. But just knowing what you're getting into and reading like all the fine print. It's also important to look at the current workforce. Is the occupation that you're picking, is it the demand increasing or is it decreasing? This is something that a lot of people find out the hard way, is that they will choose a major and the demand for that certain type of job is decreasing. And you always want to get a return on your investment, meaning that would it make sense to spend, $60,000 on a college degree that occupation is only going to pay you $12 an hour? And there's a lot of degrees that's like that, and people just need to do a lot of research. And the two websites that I would like just to point out where people can get this kind of statistics is it's www.onetcenter.org. And this gives you all kind of stats, whether the industry is increasing, the demand's increasing, or it's decreasing. It gives you the average starting salary for each occupation nationwide and the city and state where you're looking at living at. And also another really good resource is the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics.
What are some other ways that young people can lessen their financial burden when it comes to college?
This is another great question. A very, very important resource is collegescorecard.ed.gov. This is a website that all public schools and private schools that are accredited have to report to. They will list out their tuition, their student body demographics, college success rates, graduation rates, and all of that is up front. And if you have a certain zip code and you want to look at like 100 miles from where you currently are living, it tells you all that information. And it's very, very easy to look at, and you can actually compare schools side by side next to each other. So that's one good thing that you need to look at too. Another thing is to look for scholarships. There are tons of scholarships out there, but people just need to look for them. Another website that people can go to, and actually this website's been around since the late 90s, is fastweb.com. It's the largest search engine for scholarships and grants out there. Another thing that people need to understand, and this is something that's kind of surprising, but a lot of people don't really understand the difference between grants versus loans. Loans you have to pay back. And on grants, typically you do not have to pay back. But if you receive a government grant and you're not deemed a successful student and they determine that you have just been using these grants and you're not passing any classes, if that institution deems you not being a successful student, they can make you pay back those grants. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen occasionally. And when it comes to student loans and repaying those back, there's a big misconception when it comes to the terms of paying back your student loans. A lot of people will think, oh, well, I never graduated. I don't have to pay back my student loans. And that's not how it works. Students are supposed to go into repayment 6 months after they graduate or after they stop or drop out of school. And people just are not really familiar with that, but those are the rules. Another thing that people need to look at when they're picking out their college, and I'm sure you all know people like this, is that they will have a favorite college sports team. Like in Alabama, we have the University of Alabama, we have Auburn University. A lot of students will pick these schools because either they have their favorite football team or basketball team that plays there. And whenever they go to orientation, they are looking to see what that school offers as far as majors, and they pick their majors after they've picked their school. And that is kind of backwards. You should really research what you want to major in and pick the schools that offer you a quality education at an affordable price, and choose schools that's going to benefit your future career better. And just read the fine print on everything. A lot of schools that you see advertising will use deceptive marketing practices where they will promise you a laptop if you join the school. But oftentimes the fine print will tell you that if you don't graduate or if you do not complete this program, they will back charge you an exorbitant amount of money for that just run-of-the-mill computer. So just being a smart consumer and knowing what you're getting into is the important thing.
There's so much that young people learn when getting their first paycheck. What are some surprises that you learn early on?
Taxes, Social Security, insurance, and all that other fun stuff. My first job, I was actually working in a gravel pit, and I think minimum wage back in the 90s was like $4.75. So I was thinking that my paycheck for a week was going to be close to about $180. And I was shocked when about 25% of what I thought I was going to earn was missing. And so that's just one of the things that when you figure out what's the difference between your net income and gross income, that you just really need to live within your means and not overspend and try and stretch your dollar, whether however few of dollars you've got or however many dollars you've got. The important thing is to just try and stretch it as much as you possibly can.
It's imperative that they figure out how much disposable income they have left over. How do they figure that out?
Well, Tina and Francois, I think, close. We're in the same generation, I think. But spending today is so easy compared to what it was whenever, I hate to say it, but like back in my day, if you had a checkbook, it came with a ledger, and you had to keep up with the balance, and you had to do your own math. And if you wanted money for the weekend, you had to go to the ATM because credit card or debit cards really wasn't a thing in the late 90s. So if you needed cash, you had to go to the ATM, get that cash out, and whatever you had in your pocket, it had to last for the weekend because a lot of places would not take checks. And so back then we had to do our own math, and we were basically accountants of our own money. But today, when it comes to spending, you can click here, tap here, purchase things online through Amazon, TikTok, eBay, all those other, websites. And it's just so easy to spend money, and it's easy to get track of. But with that being said, we do have a tremendous benefit now of online banking. By the time that you purchase gas, that transaction is already in your bank account. So what you really need to do is to figure out how much money you have coming in each month. And at the end of the month, it's important to go through and see where are your dollars going. Impulse purchase are very, very dangerous because it's so easy to spend money, but it's important to figure out where's our money going and trying to eliminate as much expenses that you possibly can, whether that's add-on apps. There's a lot of gamers that are young that will purchase, extra moves, or they will even buy skins in Fortnite, and that's a lot of money. But no matter how young or old you are, is very important to figure out where your money is going and try and eliminate unneeded spending.
Nick, what are some other common mistakes that people make when obtaining their first job?
Yeah, again, especially when we're going out and talking to young kids, is we talk a lot about needs versus wants. And me personally, I think wants gets a bad rap. It's very important that your needs are met, like your shelter, electric bill, food. Those are traditionally your needs. But you also have some people that will have car payments, and your wants could be a new shirt, going out at night on the town, buying coffee at Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts. There's nothing wrong with having those wants, but your needs need to be satisfied before you start spending more of your money on wants versus needs. And we talked a little bit about impulse purchases. A lot of young people learned the hard way about credit cards and the interest rates that go along with the credit cards if you don't pay off your balance. A lot of the credit cards will charge, 20% on the remaining balance. And that's a lot of money. If you have, $500 on your balance that you don't pay off, an additional $100 will be added to that. And that can just become a snowball effect that's kind of hard to kind of get in control. Another challenge that faces young people is not only maintaining good credit, but establishing good credit. If you have a bill, like a cell phone bill now is actually reported to the credit bureau, where in the past it wasn't. So if you're a young person and you're trying to establish good credit, if you have bills, it's best to pay those bills early and on time, because if you don't, your credit score could drop, and that's going to affect your purchasing power big time later on. When people get their first job, one of the first major purchases that I would see people buy is their first car. And people don't understand how detrimental buying a first car can actually be. And I've just got an example. Say that you're in the market, you've got your first professional job and you're interested in buying a $20,000 car. The rule of thumb, if you have good credit, just to kind of snowball, for every $5,000 that you finance for 60 months or 5 years, that is going to be somewhere close to about $100 car payment. So if you finance $10,000, that's $200. $15,000 is a $300 payment, and $20,000 is a $400 payment. So, for example, if you have good credit and you qualify for a 5% interest rate on that $20,000 car, your monthly payment is going to be around $377 per month. And the interest that you will pay on that loan will be somewhere around $2,600 at the end of the term. However, if your credit isn't established or is not good credit, your interest rate on a car could be upwards of 20%. So that same car where you had good credit and the payment was only $377, if your credit is weak and your interest rate is 20%, that $377 car payment grows to $529 a month. And where you only paid $2,600 in interest with good credit, the bad credit at the end of the term of that loan, you would have paid over $11,000 in interest. And these are all impulse purchases that people make because they see something new and shiny and they want to have it, and they want to have it now. And they don't look long term, like, what is this going to cost? And there are other costs associated with buying a new car, like the insurance. I'm sure that many of you have seen new cars that are on the lot that only have 3,000 miles on it. A lot of times people will purchase a car and then they will figure out, oh my gosh, the insurance payment is just as high as the car payment, especially with young guys that are in their 20s that could have a couple of speeding tickets and they can't afford the car and the insurance. So they have to trade that brand new car back into the dealer. And there's other things that you need to research, like gas mileage per car. How is that going to affect your monthly gas bill? and even tires on a car. Like some of these sports cars, just to get a new set of tires could be $2,000. So it's just research, research, research anytime that you're about to make a big financial purchase.
What are some good goals to have early on when it comes to spending and saving?
Well, one of the things, even Francois led into this earlier, is it's so important to kind of start investing at an early age. But another thing that's really important is saving for a rainy day. Recently, it was discovered that nearly 4 in 10 Americans cannot afford to cover a $400 emergency expense. And, we always hope things go good, but it's very important to have some money aside to pay for unforeseen emergencies that could happen. Because if you don't have the money for an emergency, when an emergency happens, you have to take care of it. And a lot of people will put an emergency on a credit card that could incur interest.
Why should investing be a priority at a young age?
Well, this is one of the things that I talk to the young kids about. And I ask them, can you kind of tell me the things that you need to be a successful investor? And honestly, the young kids have a pretty good idea, because whenever I'm talking to the young kids, the teachers are in the other room, and I always let them know that they have more potential to potentially be a millionaire than their teachers in the next room, because the 3 things that you need to be a successful investor is a whole lot of time, a little bit of money, and a strategic plan on how to get there. So that's one of the most important things that you can have. And there's an example that I show. It's an animated cartoon, and it shows 2 twin brothers that are 19 years old. And one 19-year-old starts investing right away at $2,000 a year into an account that gains annual compound interest of 10%. And when he was 19, something happened and he stopped investing at the age of 27. So he only invested $16,000, but he let his money compound over time until he was the age of 65. So when this brother stopped investing, the other brother started investing at the age of 27, and he invested his $2,000 into the same account that was gaining annual compound interest at 10%. And he gave $2,000 a year all the way until he was 65. So his total contributions was $78,000 versus his brother that only contributed $16,000. So the question is, which brother actually ends up with more money? The one that started at 19 and only contributed $16,000, or the one that started at 27 and only contributed $78,000? Shockingly, if the scenario plays out, the brother that only invested $16,000 will have just over $1 million by the time that he is 65. And the other brother that started investing at 27, he does good for himself, but he has right at $883,000. So the moral of this story is, if you start young, you can actually have yourself set up very comfortably if you make wise, safe investing decisions to the age of 65. And this other brother that stopped investing at 27, just think how much more money he could have had if he would have continued to invest from 19 to 65.
That's a great example of the power of compound interest, Nick.
Absolutely.
Do you think the current generation is more interested in investing now than previous generations?
Thanks, Tina. I can't say necessarily that younger people are more interested in investing now more than in previous generations, but I do think at least that the popularity of social media and generally the internet has made information more accessible in a way that it wasn't in previous generations. So maybe in the past, a younger person was introduced to investing through exposure from their family or environment, and now a lot of that information about investing can be found online. So this may also influence how early they're introduced to investing concepts, since the information is more readily available. But we do know at least that younger people are investing and are at least interested in investing, even if they don't have the money yet to invest. In fact, FINRA and the CFA Institute recently published a survey where they collected money from Gen Z and millennial investors with a focus on Gen Z investors. In their survey, the age range for Gen Z investors was about 18 to 25, and the age range for millennial investors was about 26 to 41, excuse me. And pretty much this demographic of investors had about 4,000 on average to invest generally. So about 25% of Gen Z investors started investing before they were 18. About 56% of Gen Z investors in their study had some type of investments. The majority of their investments were concentrated in the typical for younger investors, which is cryptocurrency. That was about 55%. And then they were also investing in more traditional investments like stocks about 41%, and then mutual funds about 35%. So for Gen Zers who are not investing, their top financial goals still were being able to pay monthly bills. That was about 63% in the study. They didn't want to live paycheck to paycheck to pay their bills. That was also about 63%. And then finally, they wanted to have enough money to travel on vacation, and that was about 61%. So there's a lot of evidence, at least, that supports that younger people are at least thinking about how to stabilize their financial future through investing.
Why do you think a lot of young people still do put off investing?
Well, I think especially for younger folks, it may seem too early to start thinking about investing because you have so many years ahead of you before the typical retirement age. So some may not have money to put aside for investing. Some may not know where to start, what to research, and who to contact to start investing. And then, of course, you can lose your investment and your earnings aren't guaranteed. So the potential for losing your hard-earned money is pretty scary for anyone, especially for a younger person who doesn't have very much money to start investing to begin with. But like I mentioned earlier, and Nick also alluded to this, if you start with smaller concepts like thinking about career potential and then the sort of life you like to live and what sort of financial position it requires, that will help guide you to understand those investing concepts I talked about earlier, like risk tolerance and your length of time to invest, and then diversification in asset class.
What are some easy ways to start investing early?
The easiest way is contributing to a 401k at your workplace. I know that even whenever I was a part-time worker, some employers will offer you to participate in 401ks, whether you're part-time or full-time. So if you're currently employed, the best thing that you can do is to ask. And it's really, really great if that employer contributes anything. So 401k is the absolute easiest way to do that. Another thing, if they do not offer a 401k, is you might want to look up at setting up your own IRA, your individual retirement account. That would be something that you would basically manage yourself. Another thing is to look up financial advisors that fit your needs. You know, there's different financial advisors that receive income based on fee only or commission based. And there's also robo advisors that's out there. And the young people may feel more comfortable doing business with robo advisors than the older generations. So there are plenty of options. You've just got to figure out which one of these options best fits your needs.
If a young person hires a financial advisor, what are some good things to know about that professional?
There's several questions, really, you want to ask a potential financial advisor you'd like to hire. You may want to ask the financial professional if they are licensed to sell investments, and or if they can provide investment advice. You have to be licensed if you're going to provide investment advice or sell securities for compensation. You can also ask the financial professional how they're compensated. That's pretty important. You want to know if there's an incentive for them to sell a product. This is important because a financial advisor has a financial fiduciary duty to place your interests above their own. So you want to make sure they're capable of recommending a suitable investment based upon your needs, your goals, your time frame, and your risk tolerance, which is what we talked about earlier. Also, your financial advisor should give you a copy of their ADV. This document discloses important information about the advisor. And this information, for instance, is their professional background or their investing style or the fees that they'll charge or any complaint or disciplinary history that they have.
You know, there's a big misconception out there that only older people fall for fraud. or do so more than younger people. Can you share some of the data that explains why this may not be the case?
Absolutely. And the stats that the FTC published on their 2022 Centennial Report actually reports younger people report losing money to fraud more often than any other age group. 43% of the people that reported fraud that are in the ages of 20 to 29, 43% of those people reported to losing money, compared to only 23% of people in their 70s. So that dispels a huge misconception right there. And I think one of the ways why younger people fall for fraud more so than anybody else is if you've got someone that's in their 20s, think about it. It will be 2024. So if these people were born in 2004, that is the age where social media was a thing. So these people, when they were, preteens, teenagers, they do not know of a world without social media. They do not know of a world without Amazon or purchasing things online. So they're more comfortable in the online space than any other age group. They probably purchase things off of, TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, and anywhere else without doing the proper research. And a lot of these things that are advertised, especially during the holiday seasons, some of these deals are too good to be true, and they don't do the research just to see. But, the fact of the matter is, if an older person falls for a fraud, they're going to lose more money per instance because they have more money to lose. So someone in their 20s, the average loss per fraud is $548. If you're in your 70s, the average loss is $1,000. And if you're 80 plus, the amount that you're going to lose per fraud is $1,674.
What are some common frauds that target young people?
Younger people are generally more comfortable transacting online and through social media platforms. We mentioned this earlier. Finfluencers, for instance, have become pretty popular on social media. And pretty much a finfluencer is a person who uses their popularity on social media to influence the financial decision-making of their followers through paid promotions and recommendations. One of our concerns, though, with influencers is that they often lack credentials and they have no data to support their claims. Another concern that we see amongst investment scams targeting young folks are investment scams in the metaverse. And so the metaverse, for those who aren't aware, is an interactive online virtual type of world that provides an immersive experience by using virtual or augmented reality. So consider a person that you meet in the metaverse, for example, opening a, quote, virtual financial firm or offering to sell you an investment virtually. The same red flags and questions that you would ask outside the digital world should still apply in the metaverse. Another new scam that we've seen targeting specifically younger folks is called pig butchering. It's when a person uses text or online platforms like WhatsApp, for example, to send random people messages to generate a conversation with strangers to develop a relationship. So once they develop that relationship or over a few digital messages, they'll then ask you to invest in a cryptocurrency scheme that's ultimately fraudulent. So a lot of the frauds that we're seeing targeting younger folks are mostly concentrated in the digital world and or involving cryptocurrency because, again, younger folks are just more comfortable transacting on that platform.
In the same study that Nick mentioned from the Federal Trade Commission, it actually reports that investment fraud has the highest average loss than any other category. Why do you think that is?
Because I think all victims of fraud, they truly hope that the fraud is going to be true. And most investment frauds are going to promise, get rich quick, no risk. They will use terms guaranteed. And all of those are obvious red flags. But people don't want to believe that those are the actual red flags. And they bite in hook, line, and sinker. And the fraudster just reels them in. And they don't really realize it's a fraud until they've given all that they can give, and they try and withdraw their profits. And that's when they're told, or that's when they learn that it's really a scam. But on the same report, if someone falls victim to an investment fraud, it actually has the highest average loss of any other fraud category at $5,000 average per fraud. It also has the highest average percentage of people losing money at 74%. So if someone comes in contact with an investment related fraud and they fall for it, 74% likelihood is that they're going to lose some money, and it could be a large sum of money too.
What can young people do to safeguard themselves from investment fraud?
Pretty much they can investigate the offering or the investment. They'd ask the same questions you would of any stranger who walks up to you on the street and asks for your money. So some of those questions, for instance, are you licensed? How will this product that you're selling me make me money? How can I take my money out if I no longer wanted invested? You should be able to access your funds if you wanted to. How often will I receive a statement? You should be able to see the progression of your investment and how it's doing. You want to also independently verify the offering. So don't just look to the source who told you about the deal. Also go and see if you can find some information from another party. You can also, of course, contact your local state securities agency to verify their license and to also see if there's been any complaint history for that advisor. But really, the gist of the story is do some homework on the front end and give yourself time to think about the investment, because this is your hard-earned money. You don't want to lose it on a whim. But generally, just make sure you're researching the deal and understanding what you're committing yourself to before you give your money up.
Nick made a really good point earlier and mentioned in our conversation that people that are in the early 20s have never known a world that did not have the internet as a form of communication, education, and even shopping. Do you think the younger generation should play a role in protecting older family members from online dangers?
Absolutely. I know, speaking of personal experience, I had both parents that worked whenever I was in middle school and high school. And so after school, I would spend a lot of time at my grandparents' house. And you learn a lot about what your grandparents are doing, whether it's family drama going on or old people gossip, about what's going on at the church. You hear it all. But the thing is, you hear who they're talking to on the phone. And now you can actually hear or see what's going on, like with the texting. And young people know a lot more about the internet, texting, and all of that good stuff. If something as simple as the remote stops working, or the TV's not working, or the wireless network goes down, or their cell phone's not working, who do most older people call to fix that? They're going to call the 12, 13, and 14-year-old to try and help solve this technological issue. And a lot of times they can do that. So when I've recently been going out and speaking to younger people, I ask them, would you consider yourself a caregiver? And you have a couple of hands that will go up. But then whenever I ask them, how many of you have had to help your parents fix their cell phone or the wireless network or the remote, all their hands go up. But there are some easy things that young people can do to actually be the digital caretaker of their family. For instance, if they have a home computer at the grandparents' house or if their parents, doing simple things like making sure that their antivirus is updated. If they have a cell phone, make sure that the cell phone software has been updated. Your grandparents and parents may not know how to do that easily. Make sure that the wireless network they have has a strong password and it doesn't have the generic password that came with the wireless router. Make sure that they're not oversharing on social media, like when they go on vacation, that they're not posting pictures like, hey, look at us, we're out of town, come take everything that we've got in the house because nobody's home. And especially like during the holidays, just something simple, like if you get a big screen TV, let's not take that empty box and put it out on the curb for people to pass by and say, oh my gosh, they got a 75-inch TV in there, let's go take it. It's simple conversations that young people can have with the older generation that they may not necessarily think of.
What are other things younger people can do to help protect their older family members?
Just having good conversations. The older generations, they get a bad rap when it comes to technology. But if you think about it, the baby boomers, they were really the first generations that were working with personal computers on their desk back in the 80s and 90s. So the older generation, they are actually comfortable with technology, but they're only comfortable with the technology that they're used to. Where fraudsters tend to spread their net of deceit is with new technology that people are starting to learn or they're not very familiar with. So, the older generations should lean on the younger generations to teach them, the ropes of when it comes to like social media and buying things online, whether it's too good to be true, just kind of point out some of those things. And it's very, very important to have conversations with them about the fraud that's targeting young people or older people using technology, like the grandparent scam. Young people need to have this conversation. If you get a phone call from someone and it sounds like it's my voice, hang up the phone and call myself or the parents from the number that you have, just to ensure that I'm not in trouble. But anytime someone mentions, that I'm needing money, hang up the phone and give me a call. Do not engage with these people because they could be dangerous. And just like with the imposter scams, a government agency is never going to call you and threaten you to lock you up in jail because you didn't show up for jury duty. Typically speaking, if you've got a warrant out for your arrest, they're not going to call you and let you know, hey, we come to get you. You're going to hear a knock on the door first. They don't give you that kind of warning.
Francois, what are some specific red flags of investment fraud?
Sure, Tina. A lot of them are really common sense scenarios. So pretty much high pressure sales tactics. So anything that says get in now or you'll lose the opportunity later. Anything that sounds too good to be true probably is. Verbal investment agreements, again, not in and of themselves illegitimate, but certainly a red flag. Most legitimate investments are going to come with a bunch of legalese and documentation to tell you about the offering. Another potential red flag is paying for investments in cash. Again, not in of itself necessarily illegitimate, but certainly a red flag. I mentioned this earlier, not being given documents that explain the investment and the professional's background from that ADV you mentioned earlier. Not licensed to sell securities. Again, you can check with your state securities agency to figure out if this person has a proper license. Guaranteeing any sort of returns, any sort of high or double-digit returns with very low risks. Again, there's no such thing as risk without reward. They both go hand in hand. And then lastly, probably no specific discussion with your advisor about what their fees and commissions will be. They should let you know how much they're going to charge you for the investment advice they're providing you.
And how can someone keep up with the latest fraud trends going on in their communities?
There's a lot of ways. You can watch the local news. You can follow NASA online, your state securities and consumer protections social media accounts. We mentioned earlier that younger folks are just more comfortable getting their information and transacting online. So that's a great place to get some of that information. Almost every state securities agency, including the SEC and FINRA and NASA, have social media accounts to follow. You can also contact your state securities regulator. You can visit their websites as well if you don't want to talk to anyone. Sometimes it's sort of a joke. I think of younger people not wanting to have face-to-face interactions, but you can get all of this information essentially online through social media or a website. And so use those resources. Nick mentioned this earlier. The same way you would look for your resources online for anything else that you would buy, you can also get that information for what is a good investment and how you can check for those red flags.
Well, how can someone check the background of a person making an investment offer? Go to nasa.org. That is NASAA.org. Click the Contact Your Regulator tab located in the top right corner, and then simply click your jurisdiction's regulator located on the map to obtain the contact information for your regulator. Being an informed investor means having a plan and understanding each of your investments. Whether you're new to investing or already investing, NASA and its members provide a variety of online investor education resources for investors of all ages. Visit nasa.org for more information on how to be a wise and safe investor. Again, that is nasa.org, NASAA.org.
Thank you so much for joining me, and more importantly, thank you for the work you do each day to protect investors. And that's all for today's episode. From Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, I'm Tina Kotsalis.
And from Salt Lake City, Utah, I'm Francois Grayson.
And from Montgomery, Alabama, I'm Nick Bonderoux. If you have any questions about today's podcast or would like more information about the topics discussed, please email us at realliferegulators@gmail.com. That's realliferegulators, all one word, @gmail.com. If you'd like to hear future episodes, please hit the subscribe button.